He thought I was weak. He thought I'd bow my head and accept being kicked out of the house my father left me. But what Steve, the man my mother hastily married, didn't know was that I never gave up my ownership rights. The deed was still in my name. Every legal document bore my signature, and I'd been quietly paying every bill while he played king in my castle. When that secret finally came to light, it exploded into a family war that no one saw coming. This is how I reclaimed what was mine. My name is Hannah Carter, and until 6 months ago, I thought grief was the hardest thing I'd ever face. I was wrong. The Craftsman House in Riverside Heights wasn't just property to me, it was the physical embodiment of my father's love. Robert Carter built his construction company from nothing, specializing in restoring historical buildings throughout Portland. But our home was his masterpiece, his personal cathedral where every beam, every carefully chosen tile, every hand-carved detail told the story of a man who believed in permanence in an impermanent world. I remember being 7 years old, sitting on a sawhorse in the garage while Dad showed me how to read blueprints. "See this line here? Hannah," he'd say, his calloused finger tracing the architectural drawings. "That's not just a wall. That's a promise that something will stand long after we're gone." He taught me everything in that garage: how to change oil, how to use a level, how to tell good wood from bad just by the grain. While other fathers and daughters bonded over tea parties, we bonded over restoration projects, the built-in bookshelf in the living room. We spent 3 months on that when I was 15, Dad insisting on dovetail joints instead of simple brackets because anything worth doing is worth doing right. The kitchen backsplash was Mom's choice hand-painted Portuguese tiles he'd surprised her with for their 20th anniversary. The garden workshop where he stored his tools was built the year I graduated from high school. Designed specifically so he could see the sunset through the western window while working on his projects. Every corner of that house held a memory, a lesson, a piece of him. When the heart attack took him last year, it was so sudden that for weeks I'd wake up expecting to hear his voice calling from the garage, asking if I wanted to help him with whatever restoration project he'd taken on. The doctor said it was massive, instantaneous. He probably never felt a thing. Somehow that made it worse that someone so full of life could just stop, like a switch being flipped. The will reading was straightforward. Dad had always been meticulous about paperwork, probably from years of dealing with construction contracts. The house went to me, but with a lifetime residency clause for Mom. "Take care of her," he'd written in a personal note attached to the will. "She's stronger than she looks, but she shouldn't be alone." I honored that. Of course I did. Mom could live there as long as she wanted. No questions asked. I kept paying the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance costs, all from my salary as a senior software engineer at NovaForge Technologies. It was expensive, but it was Dad's house, our house, the last piece of him I could hold on to. Mom seemed to be doing okay at first. She joined a grief support group at the church, started gardening again, even talked about maybe taking an art class. I'd visit every Sunday for dinner, and we'd sit in the kitchen, surrounded by those Portuguese tiles, sharing memories and trying to navigate our new reality without him. Then she met Steve Wallace. "He understands loss," she told me, her eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen since before Dad died. "His wife passed 3 years ago, cancer. He knows what it's like." I wanted to be happy for her. I tried to be happy for her. When she brought him to Sunday dinner 2 months after they met, I smiled and shook his hand and told myself that Dad would want Mom to find companionship. Steve seemed nice enough tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of practiced charm that probably served him well as a medical equipment sales rep. He laughed at Mom's stories, complimented her cooking, even asked about Dad's construction business with what seemed like genuine interest. But something felt off when he stood in the living room, looking at Dad's bookshelf, running his fingers along the carefully joined edges. "Bit old-fashioned, isn't it?" he'd said, not quite under his breath. "All this dark wood. The room could use some updating." I should have known then. I should have seen what was coming. But I was too wrapped up in my own grief, too eager to see Mom smile again, too trusting that everyone would respect what that house meant. 6 months after they met, Mom announced they were getting married. A week after that, she mentioned almost casually that Steve would be moving in, with his 2 adult children. Just temporarily, she assured me. Eric and Monica are both getting back on their feet. Eric's going through a divorce, and Monica just found out she's pregnant. They need family right now. Family. The word stung more than I expected, but I smiled and nodded, because that's what Dad would have wanted for me to take care of Mom, to support her choices, to keep the peace. I had no idea I was about to go to war. The changes started small, so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. The first time I noticed something wrong was 3 weeks after Steve moved in. I'd stopped by after work to drop off some papers Mom needed to sign for Dad's life insurance. They were still processing some final payments. When I walked through the front door, something felt different. It took me a moment to realize Dad's leather jacket was gone from the coat hook by the entrance. That jacket had hung there for 15 years, a constant presence that made it seem like he'd just stepped out and would be back any minute. "Where's Dad's jacket?" I asked Mom, who was in the kitchen with Steve. "Oh, we donated it to Goodwill," Steve answered before Mom could speak. "Linda was finding it too painful to see every day. Right, honey?" Mom nodded, not meeting my eyes. "It was time," she said quietly. I wanted to scream that it wasn't his decision to make, but the look on Mom's face, part guilt, part plea for understanding, kept me silent. I told myself it was just a jacket. Mom needed to heal in her own way. But the jacket was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, Dad's collection of vintage tools disappeared from the garage wall where they'd been displayed. Steve had replaced them with a CrossFit banner and installed a pull-up bar. "Eric needs a place to work out," Steve explained when I confronted him. "Those old tools were just collecting dust. We got good money for them at the estate sale." Estate sale. My voice came out sharper than intended. "What estate sale?" "Just a small one, clearing out some clutter. Your mom agreed it was time to let go of things we don't use." "We..." The word made my skin crawl. Since when was there a we making decisions about Dad's things? The garden was next. Dad had spent years cultivating a mix of native plants and vegetables, each bed carefully planned and maintained. He had a journal where he tracked what he planted each season, what worked, what didn't. I found Steve ripping out the raspberry bushes Dad had planted the year I was born. "These things are invasive," he declared, sweat dripping down his face. "Monica wants to put in a meditation space here, some nice gravel, maybe a water feature." "Those raspberries have been here for 35 years, I said, my hands shaking. "Dad made jam from them every summer." Steve shrugged. "Well, Robert's not here to make jam anymore, is he?" The cruelty of the statement hit me like a physical blow. When I told Mom about it later, she just sighed. "He doesn't mean it the way it sounds. Hannah, Steve's just more practical. He doesn't get attached to things the way we do." But it wasn't just things he was erasing, it was memories, history, every trace of the man who had actually built this home. Eric took over the garage completely within a month, turning Dad's workshop into his personal gym. The workbench where Dad and I had spent countless hours was pushed against the wall, covered with protein powder containers and gym equipment catalogs. The pegboard that had held Dad's carefully organized tools now displayed resistance bands and lifting straps. Monica claimed the sunroom as her pregnancy sanctuary, filling it with crystals and essential oil diffusers. The reading chair where Dad used to sit with his morning coffee and construction trade magazines was relegated to the basement, replaced with a massage table she'd gotten from a friend. Every Sunday dinner became an exercise in biting my tongue. Steve would hold court at Dad's place at the table, talking about his plans for improving the house, new siding, modern windows, maybe knocking out the wall between the kitchen and dining room to create an open-concept living space. "This house has good bones," he'd say, as if he were some kind of expert. "Just needs to be brought into the 21st century." Good bones. Dad would have laughed at that. He'd restored dozens of historical homes, always respecting their original character, never imposing modern trends that would look dated in a decade. "You know," Monica said one evening, rubbing her growing belly. This would be a perfect house to raise a family in. So much space. Of course, we'd need to baby-proof everything. All these old fixtures and sharp corners. The implication hung in the air. They weren't planning to leave. They were planning to take over. I started documenting everything, taking photos with my phone when no one was looking. The removed fixtures, the improvements, the changes that were slowly transforming Dad's carefully crafted home into something generic and soulless. I told myself I was overreacting, that I needed to let Mom live her life. But when I found Steve in Dad's study, boxing up his architectural books and project portfolios, something inside me snapped. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Making room for my home office," he said without looking up. "I'm working from home more now. Need a proper setup." "This is Dad's study." He finally looked at me, his expression patronizing. "Hannah, I understand this is hard for you, but life moves on. This house needs to serve the living, not be a shrine to the dead." That night, I called my friend Sarah, a real estate attorney. "Can he do this?" I asked. "Can he just change everything?" "Who owns the house?" she asked. "I do. Dad left it to me, but Mom has lifetime residency." There was a pause. "Hannah, you need to be very careful. Lifetime residency doesn't mean ownership, but if you're not documenting everything, if you're not asserting your rights, you could have a problem. Has he made any structural changes?" "Not yet, but he's talking about it." "Don't let him, and start keeping records of everything, every change, every conversation, every receipt. Trust me on this." That night, I lay awake thinking about Dad, about the promise implicit in him leaving me the house. He'd trusted me to preserve what he'd built, to maintain the legacy he'd created with his own hands, and I was failing him, letting a stranger systematically erase every trace of him from the place he'd loved most. But I was done being passive, done being polite. If Steve Wallace thought he could steal my father's house, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The day I found Steve destroying Dad's bookshelf was the day something inside me broke irreparably. I'd come over unannounced on a Thursday afternoon, using my key to let myself in. The sound of splintering wood led me to the living room, where I found Steve wielding a crowbar, prying apart the dovetail joints Dad and I had spent months perfecting. "What the hell are you doing?" The words tore from my throat. Steve barely glanced at me, continuing his demolition. "This thing is attached to the wall. We need the space for Monica's entertainment center. Can't mount a proper TV with this monstrosity in the way." Monstrosity. 3 months of work, of Dad teaching me about wood grain and joint angles, of his patient corrections when I'd measured wrong. I watched a section break free, the wood splitting along a seam that had held for 20 years. "Stop!" I lunged for the crowbar, but Steve held it out of reach. "Relax, Hannah. It's just furniture." "That's not just furniture Dad made that we made that together." "Well, your dad's not here anymore, is he?" Steve set down the crowbar with exaggerated calm. "And this is our home now. We have different needs." Our home. The words made me sick. Mom appeared in the doorway, drawn by the shouting. She took in the scene, the partially demolished bookshelf, my trembling hands, Steve's defensive posture, and immediately moved to his side. "Hannah, honey, we talked about updating the living room. The TV will be much better mounted on that wall." "You talked about it. Nobody asked me." "Why would we need to ask you?" Monica's voice came from behind me. She stood there, 7 months pregnant now, one hand on her belly in that protective gesture pregnant women do, as if my anger was somehow a threat to her baby. "We live here. You don't." "I own this house," I said, the words coming out low and dangerous. Monica laughed. "On paper, maybe, but possession is 9/10 of the law, right, Steve?" "Monica's got a point," Steve said, wrapping an arm around Mom's shoulders. "Your name might be on the deed, Hannah, but we're the ones making this a home. We're the ones paying to live here." Paying. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You haven't paid a dime. I pay the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance." "We buy groceries," Monica interrupted. We pay utilities. We're improving the property value with our renovations. Renovations, you're destroying everything. Eric appeared in the doorway, fresh from his workout in what used to be Dad's garage. My father's sacred space now reeking of sweat and protein powder. What's all the yelling about? Your sister's having another tantrum, Steve said, and the condescension in his voice made my skin burn. Can't accept that life moves on. I'm not his sister, I spat. I'm nothing to any of you. Finally, something we agree on, Eric said with a smirk. That weekend, they held a garage sale without telling me. I only found out because Mrs. Patterson from next door called, confused about why Dad's tools were being sold on the lawn. I drove over to find our driveway transformed into a bazaar of my childhood. Dad's drafting table, where he'd taught me to read blueprints, was marked at $50. His collection of restoration hardware catalogs, some dating back to the 1960s, sat in boxes labeled Free, the wooden ladder he'd built himself, with my height marked in pencil on the third rung from various ages, leaned against Monica's car with a sold tag. This stops now, I told Steve, my voice shaking with rage. Does it? He crossed his arms, looking amused. And what are you going to do about it? Call the police. Tell them your mommy's new husband is selling some old junk. It's not junk. It's taking up space, Mom interrupted, approaching with a cash box. Hannah, please, we need room for Monica's baby. These are just things. Your father wouldn't want us to cling to objects. You don't get to tell me what Dad would want, I said, tears burning my eyes. You're letting them erase him. How can you stand it? Mom's face hardened. I'm trying to move forward. I'm trying to live. Steve makes me happy. Hannah, why can't you want that for me? Because he's stealing our home. No, Mom said quietly. He's making it his home. There's a difference. But there wasn't a difference, not to me. Every item sold, every change made, every memory discarded, it was theft, plain and simple. They were stealing my father's legacy piece by piece, and Mom was not only letting them, she was helping. I grabbed the wooden ladder, ripping off the sold tag. This stays. Eric stepped forward. Hey, I already paid that guy for it. Then give him his money back. I carried the ladder to my car, my hands shaking. This is mine. The marks on the third rung, that's my height at age 5, 7, 10. Dad made this for me. Dramatic much, Monica muttered, but I ignored her. As I drove away with the ladder, the only piece of Dad I managed to save that day, I made a decision. They could manipulate Mom. They could move in and play house. They could even destroy the physical reminders of my father. But the house was mine, legally, officially, irrevocably mine, and it was time I reminded them of that fact. That night, I went through Dad's papers again, studying the will, the deed, every legal document. My name was on everything. Steve Wallace might think he'd won by winning over my mother, but he'd severely underestimated Robert Carter's daughter. Dad had taught me that anything worth doing was worth doing right. It was time to do this right. The dinner invitation should have been my first warning. Mom never formally invited me to dinner anymore. I just showed up on Sundays like I had for the past year. So when she called on a Wednesday asking me to come for a family dinner that Friday, specifically requesting I arrive at 7 sharp, every instinct screamed setup. I was right. When I walked into the dining room that Friday evening, they were all seated like a tribunal. Steve at the head of the table, Dad's place with Mom to his right, Eric to his left, and Monica beside Eric. The only empty chair was at the far end, facing them all like a defendant facing a jury. Hannah, sweetie, sit down, Mom said, her smile not reaching her eyes. We need to have a family discussion. Family, there was that word again, used like a weapon. I sat, noting the folder in front of Steve. Legal-sized, official-looking, my stomach clenched. I'll cut to the chase, Steve began, his salesman voice in full effect. We've been maintaining this house for months now. I pay all the... He held up a hand. Please let me finish. We've been maintaining the household, groceries, utilities, day-to-day expenses, plus the improvements we've made. Destruction. You mean improvements that have increased the property value significantly. Eric's renovation of the garage alone added tens of thousands in value. Eric nodded smugly. The CrossFit setup is professional grade. I know guys who'd pay monthly just to use it. Furthermore, Steve continued, opening the folder, Monica will be having her baby soon. This child will be growing up here. We'll call this place home. It seems only fair that the people actually living here, contributing to the household, raising the next generation, should have some legal stake in the property. There it was, the ambush I'd sensed coming. We've consulted with a lawyer, Steve said, pulling out documents. There are several options. You could add us to the deed. Absolutely not. Or sell us a percentage of ownership. Never. Or, he paused, his eyes hardening. We could pursue adverse possession. The term hung in the air like a threat. I knew what it meant. I'd researched property law extensively since Sarah's warning. Adverse possession when someone who doesn't own a property can claim ownership by occupying it openly and hostilely for a certain period. You'd lose, I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Adverse possession requires hostile occupation. You're here with Mom's permission. You have no claim. Steve's smile was cold. Your mother's permission, yes, but not yours. And you're the owner. We could argue we've been maintaining and improving the property against your wishes, establishing our claim. That's not how it works. Or, Monica interrupted, her hand on her belly, we could make this about family, about a grandmother's right to have her grandchild in her home. Courts are very sympathetic to family unity, especially when children are involved. What grandchild mom's not? I stopped, ice flooding my veins as I understood. You're not suggesting. Monica and I have been discussing it, Mom said quietly. Adopting the baby. I mean, Steve would be the legal grandfather, and I'd be the grandmother. It would make us a real family. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Mom, Monica is 28 years old. She doesn't need you to adopt her baby. It's symbolic, Steve said smoothly, but symbols matter in court. A grandmother being denied the right to live with her grandchild in the family home. That's a compelling story. This is extortion. This is negotiation, Steve corrected. We're trying to be fair here. Hannah, you could keep partial ownership, maybe even majority ownership. We're just asking for a stake in our home. Your home. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. This is my father's house. He built it. He restored it. He left it to me. You've been here 6 months and you think you can just take it. Nobody's taking anything, Mom said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. We're trying to find a solution that works for everyone. The solution is you respect my property rights and Dad's wishes. Eric laughed. Your dead daddy's wishes. Come on, Hannah. He's been gone over a year. Time to join the real world. The real world where you mooch off my mother and try to steal my inheritance. Watch your mouth, Steve warned, standing up too. That's my wife you're talking about. And this is my house you're trying to steal. We're not stealing anything. Monica stood awkwardly, her pregnancy making the movement difficult. We're the ones living here, making this a home. You just show up once a week to mope about your precious daddy. It's pathetic. What's pathetic? I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Is a bunch of grifters thinking they can con me out of my property? Steve's face flushed red. You need to leave, now. You can't kick me out of my own house. I can ask you to leave for causing distress to a pregnant woman, he said, moving toward Monica protectively. And if you don't go voluntarily, I'll call the police. Tell them you're harassing us, threatening Monica and the baby. I haven't threatened anyone. Haven't you? Steve pulled out his phone. I've been recording this conversation. Your aggressive tone, your refusal to compromise, the way you stood up suddenly, it could easily be interpreted as threatening. I looked at Mom, desperate for her to intervene, to be my mother instead of his wife. But she just sat there, hands folded, looking at the table. Mom, my voice cracked. You're really going to let him do this? "I think," she said quietly, "you should go home and think about what we've proposed. We all want what's best for the family." "I'm your family," I whispered. "I'm your daughter. And Steve is my husband. Monica and Eric are my stepchildren. The baby will be my grandchild. We're all family now. Hannah, it's time you accepted that." I left because staying would have meant saying things I couldn't take back. As I drove away, I saw them through the dining room window, Steve pouring wine, Monica laughing, Mom smiling, Eric clapping Steve on the back, a happy family celebrating their victory. They'd pushed me out, made me the outsider, the problem, the one who wouldn't let go of the past. They'd taken my father's house and somehow made me the villain for wanting to keep it. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd threatened me in my own home. They'd shown their hand, revealed their intentions, and they'd done it all while thinking I was just a grieving daughter, too sentimental and weak to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Martin Hughes's office hadn't changed since Dad first brought me here when I was 12. The same oak desk, the same leather chairs, the same photograph of Martin and Dad at a construction site, both men grinning with hard hats tilted back. "Hannah," Martin said, pulling me into a hug, "I've been expecting you." "You have." He gestured to a chair. "Your father made me promise to look after you if anything happened to him. When I heard Linda remarried and the new husband moved in, I figured it was only a matter of time before you'd need help. I laid everything out, the changes to the house, the garage sale, the threatening dinner, Steve's adverse possession claim." Martin listened, occasionally jotting notes, his expression growing darker with each detail. "First things first," he said when I finished. "Steve Wallace has no legal ground for adverse possession. 0. He's living there with Linda's permission as her spouse. That's not hostile occupation, that's permitted residency." But he said, "He's trying to intimidate you. Classic bully tactics." Martin pulled up something on his computer. "I did some research when I heard Linda remarried. Steve Wallace has quite a history. 2 previous marriages. Both ended with disputes over property. He seems to have a pattern of targeting widows." My blood chilled. He's done this before. Similar situations, different outcomes. The first wife's family intervened before he could get his name on anything. The second wife died under somewhat mysterious circumstances, nothing proven, but she changed her will 3 weeks before a sudden illness. "Oh my God, Mom." Is probably safe as long as she's useful to him, but Hannah, we need to act fast. The longer they establish residency, the more complicated this becomes. Here's what we're going to do. Martin outlined a surgical strike of legal precision. First, document everything, every change, every item sold, every threat made. Second, send a formal cease and desist letter regarding any modifications to the property. Third, prepare an eviction notice. Can I evict them if Mom has lifetime residency? Your mother has residency rights. Her new husband and his adult children do not. The will is very specific. Linda Carter has permission to reside in the property. It says nothing about additional occupants she might bring in. But won't Mom fight it? Martin leaned back, studying me. That's the hard part. Hannah, you need to decide if you're willing to damage your relationship with your mother to protect your inheritance. I thought about Dad, about the promise implicit in leaving me the house. The relationship is already damaged. She chose them over me. Then we proceed. Martin opened a new document. But I want you to try one more thing first. Sometimes the threat of legal action is more powerful than legal action itself. We spent 3 hours crafting the perfect letter. It detailed my ownership rights, referenced Steve's lack of legal standing, and included a subtle mention of his previous marriages, just enough to let him know we'd done our homework. It demanded all unauthorized modifications cease immediately and gave them 30 days to propose a move-out timeline. What if they don't respond? Then we file for eviction. But Hannah, there's something else. Martin pulled out another file. Your father left more than just the house. There's a construction company account he set up in your name, meant for house maintenance and taxes. There's about $200,000 in there. I stared at him. What? Why didn't anyone tell me? The account was set to become accessible 2 years after his death, to prevent any hasty decisions during grief, but given the circumstances, as executor, I can release it early. Your father wanted to make sure you could always afford to keep the house. Tears burned my eyes. Even in death, Dad was still looking out for me. There's more, Martin continued. I've been monitoring the property records. Steve's been inquiring about construction permits. He wants to add a mother-in-law suite over the garage, probably for Monica and the baby. If he starts construction without your permission, that's criminal property damage. We could have him arrested. Armed with knowledge and resources, I felt stronger than I had in months. But Martin had one more surprise. I contacted a private investigator after our last conversation. Steve Wallace isn't even his real name. It's Stephen Walkowski. He changed it after his second wife's death, and Monica and Eric. They're not his biological children. They're his second wife's kids from her first marriage. They've been running this con together for years. The pieces clicked into place, the practiced manipulation, the coordinated attacks, the way they'd isolated Mom from me, it was all deliberate, refined over multiple victims. We need to warn Mom. We need to be strategic, Martin interjected. If we charge in head first, she'll protect him. Stockholm Syndrome is real. We just need to give Steve enough room to trap himself. That night, I hired my own private investigator to install security cameras around the property's perimeter, perfectly legal since I owned it. I also called the contractor Dad had used for years, asking him to do a quiet inspection and document any unauthorized changes. His report was damning. Steve had done electrical work without permits, removed load-bearing elements from the bookshelf wall, and his garage modifications violated multiple building codes. Any city inspection would result in massive fines, as the owner, would be responsible for unless I could prove the work was done without my permission. Which I could, thanks to the security footage showing Steve directing unlicensed workers. I had them, dead to rights. The question now was how to play it. Sarah, my real estate attorney friend, suggested one more angle. List the house for sale. You don't have to actually sell it, but listing it will force their hand. They'll either have to move out for showings or reveal their true intentions. Can I sell with Mom's lifetime residency? You can sell your ownership interest, transferring the same terms to a new owner. Your mom would still have residency rights. But imagine Steve's face when he realizes he might have to deal with a new landlord who has no emotional connection to the situation. It was brilliant, and with the money Dad had left for the house's upkeep, I could afford to play the long game. Steve Wallace, or Walkowski, thought he was dealing with a grieving daughter. He was about to meet a property owner who'd learned from the best builder in Portland how to construct something solid and how to tear down something rotten. The war for my father's house was about to begin. The cease and desist letter arrived on a Tuesday. I know because Monica called me 17 times that day, each voicemail more hysterical than the last. How dare you threaten a pregnant woman? I could lose the baby from stress. You're going to be responsible if something happens. Delete, delete, delete. Eric's approach was more direct. A series of text messages featuring creative profanity and vague threats about what happens to people who mess with family. But it was Mom's call that almost broke my resolve. She was crying. Hannah, how could you lawyers eviction notices? This is our family. Mom, it's not an eviction notice yet. It's a cease and desist. They need to stop destroying Dad's house. Steve's just trying to make improvements. Steve's violating building codes. Mom, the electrical work he did, it could burn the house down. Did you know that? Silence, then Steve knows what he's doing. Does he? Because a licensed inspector says otherwise? Mom, did you know his real name is Stephen Walkowski? That's ridiculous. I have the court documents. Want to know why he changed it? I don't want to hear your lies. Hannah, Steve said you'd do this, that you'd try to break us apart because you can't stand to see me happy. The manipulation was so transparent it hurt. Mom, I want you to be happy, but not at the cost of Dad's legacy, not at the cost of my inheritance. Your inheritance. That's all you care about, money. It's not about money. But she'd already hung up. 2 days later, they staged their intervention. It was almost impressive in its orchestration. They'd invited Pastor David from Mom's church, Mrs. Patterson from next door, even Mom's sister Aunt Carol, who'd driven up from California. Everyone gathered in the living room, my living room, to confront me about my destructive behavior. "Hannah," Pastor David began in his sermon voice, "your mother is concerned about your inability to process grief in a healthy way." I looked around the room at these well-meaning people who had no idea they were being used. "Did Mom mention that Steve is trying to steal my house?" "No one's stealing anything," Steve said, standing behind Mom's chair like a protective sentinel. "We're trying to blend a family, and Hannah is making it impossible with her attachment to the past." Attachment to the past. I pulled out my phone, showing pictures. "You mean like when you destroyed the bookshelf my father built? Or sold his tools without my permission? Those attachments." Mrs. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "Linda, you sold Robert's tools." Mom wouldn't meet her neighbor's eyes. "We needed space." "Hannah," Aunt Carol interrupted, "your mother has a right to move on. Steve makes her happy. Does he, or does he just want her house? How dare you?" Monica started to stand, hand on her belly, but Steve gestured for her to sit. "See," Steve addressed the room. "This is what we deal with. Constant accusations, hostility. Monica's doctor says the stress is affecting the baby." "Then maybe Monica should move out," I suggested sweetly. The room erupted. Pastor David tried to restore order while Mom cried into Steve's shoulder. Eric called me heartless. Monica claimed she was having contractions. But Aunt Carol was watching Steve with narrowed eyes. She'd never liked him, said he reminded her of her first husband, the one who'd cleaned out her bank account before disappearing. "Steve," she said suddenly, cutting through the chaos, "where did you work before moving to Portland?" "Medical equipment sales, traveling territory," he answered smoothly. "Which company?" A flash of irritation crossed his face. "MedTech Solutions. Why?" "Just curious. My friend works in that industry. Maybe she knows you." It was a lie I could tell by Aunt Carol's expression, but Steve bought it, and the slight tension in his shoulders told me everything. Aunt Carol would be checking that story. The intervention continued for another hour, with various people trying to convince me to be reasonable, to think of family, to let go of the past. Through it all, I remained calm. Documenting everything on my phone's recording app, Oregon is a one-party consent state for recordings. Finally, I stood. "I appreciate everyone's concern, but let me be clear, I own this house. My father left it to me. I will not be adding anyone to the deed. I will not be selling my ownership rights. And if the unauthorized modifications and sales of my property don't stop, I will pursue legal action." "You're tearing this family apart," Mom sobbed. "No, Mom, I'm protecting what Dad left me. There's a difference." As I left, Aunt Carol followed me out. "That man is bad news," she said quietly. "Your mom can't see it, but I can. What do you need from me?" "Keep an eye on her, and maybe check that MedTech Solutions story." She nodded. "Already on it. And Hannah, your dad would be proud of you standing your ground." The next morning, I got a call from Martin. "They've hired a lawyer," he said. "Bradley Stevenson. He's known for aggressive tactics in property disputes." Should I be worried? No, but it means they're escalating. Time to play our ace. The ace was the building code violations. Martin filed a complaint with the city, triggering an automatic inspection. As the owner, I had to be present, along with any residents. The inspector, Tom Fitzgerald, was one of Dad's old friends. He didn't cut me any breaks, though he didn't need to. Steve's work was so shoddy, so blatantly illegal, that Tom had to stop halfway through to call in his supervisor. "This electrical work," Tom told Steve directly, "is criminally negligent. You're lucky this place hasn't burned down." Steve tried to blame previous contractors, claimed the work was old, but I had receipts, security footage, documentation. The fines totaled $30,000, due immediately. As the homeowner, you're responsible, Tom told me, unless you want to file charges against whoever did this illegal work. I looked at Steve. His face had gone pale. Filing charges would mean a criminal investigation. It would mean his past coming to light. I'll think about it, I said. That night, Eric tried a different approach. He showed up at my apartment, all charm and reconciliation. Look, Hannah, things got out of hand. We're family now, whether we like it or not. Can't we find a compromise? What kind of compromise? You drop the legal stuff. We stop the renovations. Everyone goes back to normal. Normal being you all living in my house rent-free while destroying my father's legacy. His friendly mask slipped. You really want to do this. You want to destroy your mother's marriage. Make her choose between her daughter and her happiness. She already chose, I said, closing the door in his face. But his words haunted me. Was I destroying Mom's happiness, or was I saving her from something worse? The answer came from an unexpected source the private investigator called with urgent news. Hannah, you need to hear this. Steve's second wife. She had a daughter. The daughter died in a house fire 2 years ago. The official cause was faulty electrical work that Steve had done himself. The eviction notice was served on a Monday morning. I hired a professional process server and watched from my car across the street as Steve answered the door in his bathrobe, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and then rage as he read the documents. 30 days. They had 30 days to vacate the premises. Within an hour, my phone exploded with calls. I didn't answer any of them. Martin had advised me to let all communication go through him from this point forward. But Mom showed up at my office that afternoon. Security called up to ask if they should let her in. I almost said no, but the thought of my mother being turned away from my workplace was too much. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, aged 10 years in the months since Steve had entered our lives. Hannah, she said, sitting across from my desk, please, don't do this. Mom, I have to protect Dad's house. And you. Do you know about Steve's second wife? Stop with the lies. Her name was Patricia Walkowski. She died 3 years after marrying Steve. Her daughter died in a house fire caused by electrical work Steve did. Mom, the same kind of work he's been doing in our house. Mom's face went white. That's not... Steve said his wife died of cancer. I have the death certificate. I have the fire investigation report. I have newspaper articles. Mom, he's dangerous. She shook her head, but I could see doubt creeping in. Even if that's true, it was an accident. Steve would never... Mom, he's done this before. Married widows. Moved into their homes. Took everything. His first wife's family had to get a restraining order to get him out. You're making this up to justify throwing me out of my home. I'm not throwing you out. You can stay. You have lifetime residency. It's Steve, Eric, and Monica who have to go. If they go, I go. The ultimatum hung between us like a blade. Then that's your choice, Mom. But I won't let them steal what Dad left me. I won't let them destroy everything he built. She stood to leave, then turned back. Your father would be ashamed of you. It was meant to hurt, and it did, but I knew better. No, Mom, Dad would be ashamed of you for letting them desecrate his memory. 2 days later, they played their nuclear option. Monica went into early labor. The call came from Eric, frantic and accusatory. She's at the hospital. The stress you caused made the baby come early. If anything happens to them, it's on you. I almost fell for it, almost rushed to the hospital, but something felt off. I called the hospitals in Portland. None had a Monica Wallace or Monica Walkowski admitted. They were lying. Martin confirmed it when he called an hour later. They're filing for an emergency injunction to stop the eviction, claiming medical hardship due to pregnancy complications. Judge Reynolds is hearing it tomorrow. Can they win? Not if we prove they're lying about the medical emergency. I hired a private investigator to sit outside the house. Sure enough, Monica was photographed that evening, very pregnant but very mobile, carrying grocery bags inside. We presented the photos to Judge Reynolds the next day. This is a clear attempt to manipulate the court, the judge said, glaring at Steve's lawyer. Motion for emergency injunction denied. The eviction stands. Steve lost it in the courtroom. This is corruption. You're all in on it. That house belongs to us. His lawyer tried to quiet him, but Steve was beyond control. We've invested everything in that property. We have rights. Mr. Wallace, Judge Reynolds said coldly, you have no rights to property you don't own, and if you continue these outbursts, you'll be held in contempt. That's when Steve made his biggest mistake. Maybe something happens to that house, he said, looking directly at me. Accidents happen. Fires start. Would be a shame if all that wood went up in smoke. The courtroom went silent. Mr. Wallace, the judge said slowly, did you just threaten arson in my courtroom? Steve's lawyer went pale. My client is emotional. Your client just made a terroristic threat. Bailiff, take Mr. Wallace into custody. As they handcuffed Steve, he kept shouting, Linda, tell them we own that house. But Mom sat frozen, staring at him like she was seeing him for the first time. With Steve in jail awaiting a bail hearing, the house felt different. Eric and Monica were subdued, packing boxes without their usual smugness. Mom hadn't spoken to me since the courtroom incident, but Aunt Carol called with updates. She's in shock, Carol said. She's starting to see what we all saw, the manipulation, the lies. She found documents in Steve's things, plans to have her declared incompetent after they got the house transferred. My God. There's more. Monica's not even pregnant. It's a fake belly. They were going to lose the baby after getting the injunction. Use it for sympathy. The con was even deeper than I'd imagined. With 2 weeks left on the eviction notice, Eric approached me one last time. We'll go quietly, he said. No more fights, but we need money, moving expenses. You've got to be kidding. Think of it as a bargain. We leave peacefully, no damage to the property, and you never hear from us again. Or you leave anyway because you have to, and if there's any damage, I sue you into bankruptcy. He smiled coldly. You sure the house will still be standing when we go? It was another threat, but this time I was ready. Eric, you're on camera right now. You're being recorded. You just threatened my property. Would you like to join Steve in jail? His face went white. He backed away, hands up. I didn't mean anything. 14 days, Eric, then you're gone. That night, I stayed in the house for the first time in months, not to gloat, but to protect it. I walked through the rooms, cataloging the damage, the changes, the losses. It would take months and thousands of dollars to restore everything. But it would be restored. Dad's bookshelf would be rebuilt. His garage would be returned to its original purpose. The garden would be replanted with the vegetables and native plants he'd loved. Mom came by on day 13. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. I'm going to stay with Carol for a while, she said quietly. I need to think. Mom, you don't have to leave. The house is yours to live in. I know, but I can't. I can't be here right now. Every room reminds me of how stupid I've been, how I let them. She started crying. Hannah, I'm so sorry. Your father would be so disappointed in me. He'd be disappointed in both of us, I said, pulling her into a hug. But he'd understand. He always said people make mistakes. It's what they do after that counts. Steve made bail, she whispered. But there's a restraining order. He can't come near the house, or us. Good. The police found things in his belongings, evidence from other women he's done this to. They're building a case. We stood in Dad's living room, holding each other, surrounded by the ghosts of what had been and what was almost lost. I'll come back, Mom said. When I'm ready, when I'm me again. The house will be here, I promised. Dad built it to last. The next morning, day 14, Eric and Monica were gone. The restoration began on a Saturday morning, 6 weeks after Steve, Eric, and Monica had vanished from our lives. I stood in Dad's garage with Tom Fitzgerald and 3 of Dad's old crew members who'd volunteered to help. The CrossFit equipment was gone, sold to recoup some of the costs. In its place, I'd arranged Dad's tools, the few I'd managed to save, and others I'd bought back from the people who'd purchased them at Steve's garage sale. "Robert would be proud," Tom said, running his hand along the workbench we'd just reinstalled. "You fought for what mattered." The bookshelf took 3 months to rebuild. I hired Marcus Chen, a master carpenter Dad had mentored years ago. Together, we studied photos, examined the broken pieces I'd saved, and recreated every dovetail joint, every carefully carved detail. When it was finished, it was actually better than before. Marcus had added a hidden compartment where I placed Dad's original blueprints for the house. Mom came by during the reconstruction, tentatively at first, then more frequently. She'd been seeing a therapist, working through not just Steve's manipulation, but her grief over Dad that she'd never properly processed. I was so desperate not to be alone, she told me one afternoon, watching Marcus work. Steve seemed like salvation. He was so attentive, so understanding. I see now it was all calculated. Steve was serving 18 months for criminal threats and fraud. The investigation had uncovered 7 other victims across 3 states. Eric and Monica had disappeared, but there were warrants out for them too. The fake pregnancy belly had been found in the trash, the final proof of their elaborate con. "I keep thinking about that poor woman," Mom said. "Steve's second wife, and her daughter. It wasn't your fault, Mom. These people are professionals. They knew exactly what buttons to push." She nodded, but I could see she'd carry that guilt for a long time. The garden restoration became a community project. Mrs. Patterson donated raspberry bush cuttings from plants she'd grown from Dad's original bushes. Other neighbors brought vegetables and native plants. Even Pastor David came by with an apology and a handful of seed packets. "I should have seen through him," he said. "Your father was a good man. He deserved better than what happened here." By spring, the house looked like Dad had never left. Better, even, because now it carried new stories. 2 stories of fighting back, of standing ground, of protecting what matters. Aunt Carol moved in temporarily to keep Mom company when she finally returned. They spent evenings going through photo albums, telling stories, reclaiming memories that Steve had tried to taint. One evening, I found Mom in Dad's study, which I'd restored exactly as it had been, down to his architectural books arranged by subject and date. "I put something here," she said, pulling out a folder. "Your father wrote this for you before he died. He made me promise to give it to you when the time was right. I think that time is now." The letter was vintage Dad, practical and heartfelt in equal measure. "Hannah," it read, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've had to fight for something. Knowing you fought hard, and you fought smart. The house is yours, not just because I left it to you, but because you'll understand what it represents. It's not about the wood and nails, it's about having something solid in a world that's always shifting, something you can trust, something worth protecting. Take care of your mother. She's stronger than she knows, but fragile in ways she'll never admit. And remember, buildings can be restored, but relationships sometimes can't. Choose your battles wisely. Peace. Check the 3rd basement stair from the bottom. I left something for you." Mom and I went to the basement together. The 3rd stair had always creaked, but I'd never thought much about it. When we pried up the board, we found a metal box. Inside was $50,000 in cash and another note. "For the restoration I knew you'd have to do. Someone would always try to change things. That's human nature. But you're a Carter. We build things to last, and we rebuild when necessary." Mom laughed through her tears. "He knew. Somehow, he knew." "He knew I'd protect it," I said, "and he knew you'd need time to heal." We used the money to finish the restoration and to install a state-of-the-art security system. The rest went into an account for the house's future maintenance. Steve's lawyer tried one last gambit, suing for the value of the improvements they'd made. Martin shut it down with prejudice, countersuing for damages, emotional distress, and fraud. We won. The settlement would cover all my legal fees and the restoration costs. A year later, The house was featured in Portland Monthly's article about historical preservations. They photographed Dad's bookshelf, the restored garden, the garage with his tools displayed like the works of art they were. The article mentioned the attempted theft, turning our story into a cautionary tale about protecting family inheritances. Mom and I were in the kitchen when the magazine came out, sitting at the table where so many family dinners had taken place. "I'm thinking about dating again," she said suddenly. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Really?" "Not seriously, just coffee, maybe dinner. Carol knows someone from her book club." "That's good. Mom, just maybe let me run a background check first." She laughed, really laughed for the first time in 2 years. "Deal. And Hannah, thank you. For fighting when I couldn't. For seeing what I refused to see. For saving Dad's house." "Our house, Mom. It's our house." She squeezed my hand across the table, and in that moment, sitting in the kitchen my father built, surrounded by his handiwork and his memory, I knew we'd won more than just a legal battle. We'd reclaimed our family's legacy, exposed a predator, and learned that sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is to fight like hell to protect what they left behind. Dad was right, I was a Carter. We built things to last. And when someone tried to tear down what we'd built, we rebuilt it stronger than before. The house stood solid around us, every board and beam a testament to the man who'd created it and the daughter who'd saved it. Outside, the raspberries were growing again, reaching toward the sun, resilient and enduring, just like Dad taught me to be. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to fight for something that rightfully belonged to you? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments.